Welcome to the only AL procedure you need to deal with dimensions. Hey, I'm Eric, and one of the accounting superpowers of Business Central is dimensions. And dimensions are, users love them and they use them a lot. But when it comes to dealing with dimension in the code, quite often it gets really, really complicated because you got some dimensions that are sitting somewhere and dimension sets, and it's complicated. But it doesn't really have to be. In reality, we can kind of boil this down to one single procedure that you need to build, and maybe you need variants of that, or if depending on how clever you are with record refs and all that good stuff. But in reality, there's one scenario that you really need to handle, and if you handle that one scenario, you're a champ at dimension AL, handling dimensions in AL. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. So here's a sales order, and on a sales order we have dimensions. And dimensions is actually a very privileged function inside Business Central because it has a shortcut key. So I can press Alt D and I get to dimensions, which is pretty cool, and you can do that in a lot of places. So here we can see that on this sales order we have 4 dimensions: area, customer, group, department, salesperson. And these dimensions have come to the sales order because of operation that has happened on the sales order. So when you select a customer, if the customer have default dimensions, they will get transferred to the sales order. And again, if we go look at the line, we can see that a line also have dimensions, and then they might be different because the item might have dimensions and so on. So quite often when we're working with dimensions in code, there's already lots of stuff that's happening with dimensions before we even get to do what we want to do. So let's think about the process, what actually happens. So we know that, and I think I can do this here, even though that's right above my head. So if I do, we can see that in Kronos, that combination of dimension, those 4 we just looked at, happens to be dimension set ID 4. But if I go back to dimensions and then I add a business group and I add office here, so now I'm working in some sort of list here with dimensions, but we know that dimensions are not stored on the sales order. They're just stored like with the ID. So when I close this one, I want to update lines. But now we can see that now we are on dimension set ID 27. So this combination of dimensions that we selected is now set ID 27. So let's just make sure that I'll just vocalize what I'm thinking here. So think about that. We have a set, and then what we quite often will have to do in code, say, okay, we need to add 2 more dimensions. So we got something, we need to add 2 more, and then we got get a new set from that. So that's the process that we need to do some code to actually be able to support. So and the list we saw is a temporary list. So from a data perspective, there are no dimension records sitting. Now at this point we just have that number 27, and when we go into dimensions, well, we get the list because we know that the set 27 consists of these 5 dimensions with these values. Anyway, so let's go into Visual Studio Code and see how we can get to this. So we want to end up with a function or procedure. So let's call it update dim set on sales header. Right, that's a good name. So clearly we are getting a sales header record. We're probably getting as var. And then we need to, because we might need to add 2 or 4 or 7 dimensions. So we need to pass in a list of dimensions and values. And an easy way to do that is to pass a temporary record. So we'll pass a record, and there is a record already, because what we saw here, if we take a look at this, we can see that this is a dimension set entry. So clearly this works. So if we pass the function a dimension, let's see if I can spell dimension set entry temporary. So we want this function to update the dimension set on the sales header, and we want to add these dimensions we have in here. So imagine that if we have a function up here, and let's say, so we'll call this dims again, and record dimension set entry temporary. So we want to do something like, dims.init, because that's always proper, and then dims.validate. And what fields do we have? Well, we have a dimension code. So let's actually, now we added the business group, so we can use that as an example, business group and office. So let's just delete this from here. So at some point, if we get, we can see this is still dimension set 27, and we're updating, and now we are back to, we're back to 4, because that was the combination before. So business group and office, that's what we want. So dimension code is business group, and dimension value code was office. And now we'll just insert this into this temporary. So now we have a temporary set. So these are the dimensions we want to add. So we'll call our great update dim set on rec, and we're passing these guys. And then I think after this we probably need to modify rec. Let's see if we get to this. Okay, so Microsoft is helping us, and I think that's the important part. And so they have a code unit called dimension management. Here, no space, dimension management. So that's where we need to go to get some help. Dimension management, and there's a bunch of functions in here. But the one that we really need is actually called get dimension set ID. And we can see here that, you can see a pattern that this takes a record. And let's see if we can actually go to the source of this one. Maybe that's pretty cool. So this one takes a record of dimension set entry. But this, since this is var, since this is var, this can either be real or temporary. So this function, you give it a set of dimensions, and it gives you a dimension set ID, which is exactly what we need. But we can't really, dimension set ID equal dimension, and then we'll just pass our dimensions and be done with it. Because remember that there might already be dimensions on this cell setter. So we cannot just replace all the dimensions we had with the one that we want to add. So we gotta run through a bunch of hoops here. If you haven't got anything to drink, you better get it, because hey, we gotta write some code to make this work. So so let's do some housekeeping here. So we need to create something to pass into this guy. So we could call that new dim set. So new dim set would have to be a dimension set entry temporary again. So now we're passing this. So the first thing we need to do is get the dimension set we already had. So in that aspect, we actually need another one. So let's actually make sure that we save that. So we need to look in. Let's think about this for a second. We need to go into dimension management and get dimension set. And we might as well get it into the one we're building new. So we can get this, and we need to tell that this is dimension set ID. So, and I can't remember, this is var. Let's see if what is this? No. So we need to tell that this dimension set, we want that. So actually, let's just try to run this for a second here, and we'll just get rid of that modifier thing again. If we may make mistakes may happen, and we can just do a message here. So what did I call it? New dim set count. Let's see what we get, and we can also do a breakpoint. Let's run this, see what happens. I call it the action test dimensions. Actions test dimensions. Let's actually pin this one. We got a breakpoint. Let's actually just continue. So we got 4 records, which, hey, that's pretty good, because that's exactly what we had in here. Okay, so far so good. So now we kind of need to, we get the new dim set, and we have the ones we want to add. Maybe we should. Wow. I guess why is that not working? See that? I hit let's see if we can get the deeper. I hit F2 on this guy, and the rename function is now broken. Interesting. Well, in that case, we don't really need it, so we can new dim. No. To add dimensions. So what we need to do? Sorry. Have anybody you guys seen that before? That's interesting. That seems to be broken. Well, if anybody from Microsoft see this, feel free to create a bug for that. Anyway, so we need to merge this guy with this guy, because now we have two sets and we want one set. But so I guess we need to do a if to add dimensions find set, then loop through this. So we need to repeat until to add dimension next equals 0, and then we need to figure out what is the primary key of this guy. The primary key is dimension set ID and dimension code. So we could do and say that if new dim set dot get, and this is still from the old, so this is dimension set ID on the cell setter, comma, and what was the second? That was the dimension code. So we need to see. So here's the thing, that maybe we are trying to add a dimension that's already there, and we want to override that. We could also get into prioritization and stuff like that, but let's handle that part of the merge, figure out what we want to do. So in this case, to add, and then it's dimension code. So if the cell sorter already have one of the dimensions we want to add, then we want to do something otherwise. We want to, let's see if we can do it like this. So we want to say new dim set equal to add dims, and then new dim set dot insert. Let's see if that works. So we want to copy the one we had into the set. But if this is not the case, so if it's already there, then let's update it. So we could say that new dim set dot validate. No, see, this one would actually. You see, this one would. That was not interesting. What did we do? We didn't. Maybe let's see if the because you see the dimension set ID is actually in here. So we might need to say that new dim set dimension set ID equal cell setter dimension set ID. Oh, this is getting funky. Anyway, hey, but validate dimension value code with the to add dims dimension value code, and then new dim set dot modify. Okay, so let's see if this works. We still got a message and we got a breakpoint, so let's see how this goes. Go away with this one, go with this one. So action, test dimensions, we get our breakpoint. So new dim set has a records that says 4, that was the old one, but business group is the new one, and office. And if we continue here, we now have 5 entries in this guy. Okay. Not bad, not bad. So let's now this guy suddenly makes sense. The one we started and saying that was pretty naive. So this one actually I think this one works now. So the next thing we need to do is there's another function. So in dimension management, there's an update global dimension from dimension set ID. So here's the thing that potentially this could be a global dimension. We wouldn't really know, and our code needs to be resilient. So if you have a setup and you feed some dimension, it should not matter whether that's a, I hate the definition shortcut dimension, because there are no dimensions that are shortcut dimensions. Shortcut means that certain dimensions are being tagged to be columns in journals, but they're no different than a non-shortcut dimension. So there are only global dimensions and other dimensions. But potentially, you could have setups saying that you're importing stuff in this dimension, this value, and that dimension, that value. And then suddenly the customer switch around what is global and not. And your code should still work. So we have a function called update global dimension set ID. The update global dimension from dimension set ID. And so now we have a new dimension set ID, which is this one, and then we need to pass, because this one has 2 var, so we can say cells header dot dimension shortcut 1 and cells header, and that's also pretty bad field naming, but hey, that's a whole other discussion. So right now this one is updated. So if let's do this. We'll create a message here. Let's get rid of this guy. We don't need that one anymore, and get rid of this one. And so we want the cells header dimension set ID, cells header shortcut dimension 1, and cells header dot shortcut dimension 2 in a message. We're still not saving anything. Let's look at how this actually works. Go away with that one. So action, test dimension. So now we get to 27. I can't remember what dimension we were. Was it 27, that combination? So clearly we get a new combination and we get an ID. So let's change this to home. So that should be a new set, I guess, meaning that should be 28. Maybe we got some other combinations, but we get a new set. So I think we're ready to try to modify. How about that? Let's turn on the modify again without this. Deploying. Get rid of this, get rid of that. Okay, so let's verify what we have here before we start. We have area, customer group, department, and salesperson. And we are, let's grab this guy and set ID, so we know that we're on dimension set 4. We go to action, test dimensions. Now we add dimension set ID 30, and we'll see here that we now have 5 dimensions on this guy, and we got business group home. So we got our function. We got now in code the ability, and hey, it's not that bad. What's that? 20 lines of code. So now we got the ability to update a dimension set, saying, hey, we want to add this dimension to and I guess we actually need to, let's find another one. Purchaser RB. Let's add that one just to make sure that we can, and let's get rid of the business group. So now we're back on dimension set 4. Let's make sure that our function actually can do 2. Purchaser RB. Let's see how this goes. I got to stop the debugger. Shift F5 will do that, and then F5 again to start it. Okay, we'll set up all the usual suspects here with, we are on dimension set 4, action, test dimensions. Now we are on dimension set 32, and let's check dimensions, and we have 6 dimensions. Pretty cool. So that's how you can be a champ of dimension coding in AL. And to be honest, variants of this procedure are scattered all over my customers, because this is the scenario we end up with again and again, that suddenly we have some sort of automation, we import stuff, and we need to apply dimensions. But we need to do it the right way, because we get dimensions fed from other sources, so it's never the easy one. Let's just find the set with the dimension we need to add, because there's already something. Or maybe you need to, depending on how your code is, you might end up calling this multiple times to figure out what should the dimension be now, and we update the line. Bonus content is that if you want to make this truly generic, well, instead of passing sales header, you could pass a record ref and work through that, so figure out where the fields are you need, but I think what we usually do is kind of build this up in the places we need, copy paste. So the only improvement you could add was some work here with the prioritization between dimensions values. So in case that, if the case where, so normal BC supports that, hey, if you get the same dimension from 2 different spots, which one should win? And I've seen, and I've implemented several solutions where, depending on certain cases, maybe we should not apply that dimension if it's already there, and so on. So yeah, there's options in here, but this is fairly simple, and all the hard stuff in figuring out the sets ID and combinations and stuff like that is handled by the dimension management code unit. Anyway, I suggest that you go and watch, and this is really hard. I'm doing this because I saw somebody on YouTube who did this. Cool. Go watch that video, because that's good. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.